Good morning, and thanks for joining us live on Facebook now that Facebook is up and running again. It was touch and go there last night when we lost WhatsApp and Facebook for a short while. But we're back in the world of the living today, and we are joined by Ben Sellers and Nitin from Starberry. Good morning, chaps. How are you doing?
Hi, David. We're very good and great to be on the Kerfuffle show.
It's fantastic to have a panel with some of your agents as well that you've worked with. So I'm going to introduce Trevor Haynes from Cambridge Property Lettings, a self-confessed accidental agent, but quite a few years into it, is accidental no more, and now manages quite a few hundred properties and has a very established pedigree in the business. We have George Cobb, who looks like he's working for Starberry today, but I think he knows about product placement, so he's wearing all of their merch. Good morning, George.
Morning, David. Really nice to be here. Thanks very much for having me. Looking forward to it.
It's great to have you all. And today we're here to talk about Starberry, but specifically being a lead generation powerhouse. So whatever you knew about Starberry previously, you may know their fantastic websites that they do, but their capability to generate leads for agents online are just superb. So Ben and Nitin, I think I'm going to hand over to you initially to sort of introduce what do you think the biggest challenge for agents is right now when it comes to generating online inquiries? Has the online valuation tool had its day?
I think that it's just a tool, as you said. It can be a very useful tool somewhere in the journey. But if you're going to just dump someone in straight onto it, you're not going to get the answers you want. You know, you've got to tell your story. You've got to have stories. You've got to have your creative campaign in which it is, placed somewhere along that journey. So I think one of the reasons that we were delighted to invite Trevor and George to this call was both of them have, and their businesses have always embraced really going over and above the call of duty and not being absolutely never wanting to go down the sort of cliched estate agent route with my famous Lego houses and handshakes and keys, and that's job done and there's your instant valuation. They've actually thought about what it is that they're doing and the USPs for their own businesses. And together we've actually created some really valuable, engaging content that right as we speak is smashing it out of the park in terms of driving valuable leads. I hope that they can can support me on that one as well.
Another thing that we... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go on, Nitin.
Yeah, another thing that I wanted to highlight over here is with the agents out there, especially our clients, when the market's doing really good, they're focused on their prime source of business. That is actually getting the sales done, getting the lettings done, etc. And that's not the point of time where they can actually devote enough time to creating content, working on strategy on the digital space. So that's where we come in, and we take that pain off their shoulders so that we work along with them to drive more leads. And that's what actually helps them as a support mechanism. So we are technically, their in-house, out-house, digital team, where we work along with our clients to get them the best results that they can while they focus on what they do best and leave what we do best to us.
So, I mean, I will ask both our agents on the panel this morning. I think that what Nitin has just said is entirely true. One of the challenges of being an estate agent in the modern world is that we have to wear more hats than George is wearing this morning, but we do. We have to be we have to be marketeers. We have to know what we're doing in terms of digital marketing. You still have to get down to brass tacks and be a good old-fashioned estate agent at the end of the day and talk to your clients and deliver a fantastic service. But with the multitude of hats that we have to wear, it becomes harder to deliver a rounded service that you would say is 10 out of 10 in every area. if you're lucky, sometimes you get to pick one and do that really well, and the others suffer. So I take it working with Starberry therefore has been an absolute blessing and music to your ears, George.
Yeah, I think your point around marketing is really important. So I had a career in marketing for about 15 years. I was lucky to work for some big corporates, but this has been one of the hardest marketing challenges. And the reason is because you're dealing with people's most valuable asset. And you've got to take that really seriously. And that requires you to think very carefully about how you're going to sell and therefore market this proposition and this asset. And you've got to do it well. You've got to do it to a really high standard. And therefore, it's about the whole mix. And yeah, we talk about lead generation and evaluation. But for me, one of the first things I did with Starberry, which was just awesome, and that's what they're all about, creating awesomeness, which I put on here. Right on. So it is the website, because that's where a lot of people are going to go. And that's one of the things that Starberry did so well for me, is they just created an awesome website. And that's a lot about the brief to them, and we'll talk more about getting the best out of your creative agency later, maybe. But for me, is you can drive people to the website, but it's not just about your valuation tool. What's the story you're telling? What's the content that you've got on there? And you're convincing not only potential buyers and tenants, but also your vendors and landlords that you are the best person or best agent to market their most precious asset.
Can I just compliment you on your website, both George and also the fellas at Starberry, in doing copious amounts of research, as I do for every webinar, hours and hours. But 5 minutes before the show started, I Googled you. And when you hit your landing page, it is very quickly, you become aware of the fact that this is not just another generic estate agent, as Ben says, with the pictures of a couple handing over the keys to the house or whatever it normally is. But this is almost like a family-run business that is focused on people within their communities, a local agent that can help people, and it's just got a lovely, warm, loving, sort of friendly vibe to it. Very unlike other estate agents' websites, if you don't mind me saying.
David, you've just made it all worth it. Thank you very much.
That's it from us today, folks. We'll catch up with you all next week. But I presume that's entirely by design in terms of the look and feel that you were looking for.
We were really clear. This is about 6 years ago, the collaboration with Starberry started, and I was very clear on the brief, and I've still got it. And the first slide said, if Apple and Airbnb were to design an estate agent's website, what would it look like? And at the time, that was a really nice blend of beautiful design and user interface. And Airbnb, and still to this day, they just had a lovely way of navigating around the system, and therefore Ben and Nitin and the guys just brought together this wonderful creative team, and we as agents, and not just agents, as a client, we have a really important responsibility to focus on the brief, because that's classic saying, you get out what you put in, and you've got to inspire these guys. You want them to feel excited and motivated. I want them drinking the Daniel Cobb Kool-Aid. Okay, and in order to do that, I've got to bring the energy to the party as well.
And I think that to give you credit, George, he didn't spend decades at some of the top ad agencies for nothing with obscene budgets. He came here with not so obscene budget, but a sensible one. But where he might not have had the budget, he put in so much effort with his team. And we always say it's a collaborative game, this. It's not just Starberry, go do it. It's actually, we need to connect. And I think we connected so well. We loved it. We all went over and above the call of duty. And I think the best moment for me was seeing George go up on stage at the Sunday Times, when it was still the Sunday Times Awards, to collect gold. And Peter Knight had told him the night before, no, you're not allowed. We're too oversubscribed. You're not allowed to have any suppliers joining the table because we've got too many agents that are part of the Property Academy that need to go. So George and I had this little ploy. And if you see the picture, we've got it knocking around. There's George with Matt Dawson, I think it was, George,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
Yeah.
And he's holding his mobile phone and I'm on FaceTime as George is collecting the gold award. But really, I mean, when I go on the site today, and I think we built that in 2015. Now, of course, we've iteratively changed it. And George reminds me of how many people copy it. We have seen some literal copies. But it was built to evolve, and it was built to contain thoughtful, creative campaigns, which we knew together we were going to do. So it really has been great and continues to be.
So, talking to Trevor now, maybe Trevor said something off camera before, which was a lovely moment between him and George, where he said that one of his briefs to Starberry was, "Give me what George has got. I'll have 2 of those."
You're muted, Trevor.
Let's
Sorry, we
unmute
got you
Trevor,
muted.
1 second.
It's back on again.
We started looking at website design, and I looked to see who had won the Sunday Times Award. So once I'd spotted George, I then realised there was something called Starberry. And interestingly, I went to an ALA conference and sat next to Miles Shiplake, who runs Rightmove, quizzed him, and he said, that's the man to go to. And so that's how we got involved with Starberry. But I think the point I would make is that we're very different because we're very small. We haven't got a George who's an expert, and the problem is multiple hats. So I've always said the secret in life is to know what you're not good at, which is why I employ lots of people to do everything. And so equally, that's why we have Starberry. So Starberry is in fact in-house, as it were, marketing team who reach all sorts of aspects for us. And I think that's essential for a small agency like us. But it starts, I think, with knowing who you are. You've got to know who you are, what you stand for. You know, when we're talking of leads, there are plenty of leads I don't want. But I need the few that really align with what we stand for. And I think that's the key. Because if you just try and do a scattergun, you just get too many leads, you don't know who you are, it's not what you want. So I think working out your values, working out what you stand for, and then building from that is where you start.
It's a really good starting point to sort of define your objectives, particularly. We touched on it earlier. You don't need to have a budget that is as big as some of the biggest names in our industry, because if deployed correctly and using a more modest budget correctly, it does allow you to go toe-to-toe with the big boys and deliver some real results. But I'm going to hand over to the guys at Starberry to explain how this works, because having a pretty website in itself isn't enough to generate leads. So how are you doing it, and how are you doing it in such a way that you're getting quality leads as opposed to stunts, which is easy to generate?
Yeah. So, one of the things that, especially working with George and Trevor, is that they are very open to new ideas. So whenever there's something new that we feel is, slowly picking up steam, we probably need to, start incorporating them into our whole marketing mix. They're usually the first ones to say, yes, let's give it a try. And that's the kind of trust that we've built over the years. And, vice versa, whenever they come across something, they really, pass it on to us. And then we try to make the best of what we could. Just to give you an example, George had a brilliant idea where George, is a very passionate army man himself. And he really wanted to have a campaign that talks about, hiring ex-army veterans, as handymen. And we felt that was something that was beautiful. We really don't need to milk it for leads, but that's a wonderful story that we really need to build around. And then we went ahead and did that. We did a couple of videos. We had changed the website a bit to reflect it, created a bit of content. And then the leads that come in who are from people who actually read those stories are the kind of people that George probably wants to interact with. Similarly with Trevor, recently, Trevor has given us the go ahead to start looking at videos, and we've been, trying out different stuff. So we're still very early to figure out what those, videos are that we can really work with. And it's the patience that our clients show when when we all aware that something new that we're trying out, it's an experiment. They don't come back to us in 24 hours saying, listen, it's 24 hours since the video is live, where are the leads? So it's all about that trust, and it allows us to really understand what the clients are looking for. Just like Trevor said, there's you can get junk. It's very easy. It's very easy to build on that. But to get you those quality leads, initially you have to wade through a lot of the junk to really find out where those gems are and what did you do that may attract those gems. And for us, it's all about continuously optimizing the campaigns, seeing what works best, and then just repeating it and then trying to do better. So we use multiple channels for that.
One of the interesting things you talk about videos is when we started looking at video, and I know that Ben's really strong on video, and we'd love to do a lot more, but there's capacity at our end. One of the surprises in lockdown was when we did a video on the comparisons between sourdough brioche and Cambridge property lettings.
I love that one, Trevor.
We got 19,000 views in about 3 weeks. And it just hit the mark. And I think sometimes it just needs a bit of imagination, and you need to think, what is it that people will stop and look at? Or what is the content they want to know about? Not what do we want to tell them?
I couldn't agree more with Trevor on that one. And Ben's been campaigning hard about videos for the last 4 or 5 years, Ben. And I'll admit I'm a bit of a late adopter, actually. I think, and with Trevor, it's about capacity. But that's where the collaboration's got to come in my experience with Starberry, is you've got to be prepared to carve out time in your diary and do the video. Trust yourself. It doesn't have to be perfect. That army one you're talking about, it took me 20 takes to do that. But, I had a giggle to myself, at the end of it. And the guys just made it look fabulous at the end. But it's, you think about the Richard Branson 60-second elevator pitch. Forget it. It's the 15 seconds to 20 seconds. That's how we consume media right now. It's in bite-sized chunks. And if you haven't made that great first impression, like you do on a doorstep or on video in the first 2 seconds, then you've lost people. So I'm totally with you, Trevor. It's about imagination. It's about throwing yourself in there. And it's just doing it and doing it regularly. I can talk the talk. I'm not necessarily walking the walk. I don't mind admitting, but we're getting there.
Yeah, but the walk you have walked, George. I mean, the amount of times I've shown people a video. I mean, George came up with this idea a few years back. We're still campaigning it as we speak, which is locally grown. Now, Seth Godin, he's always talking, just own your local, just stay focused around your local element. Forget trying to take on the world. And if you think of those videos that you did do, George, they're from your mobile phone. Here I am outside Bob's Lobster, and you've got this great scene going on. I've shown it so many times. I've shown it on Rightmove webinars, all sorts. But it's real life. It's engaging. You meet the boss, one of the bosses of Daniel Cobb. You get some local, you get your 10% off a burger, and then at the end you dovetail in. And if you're interested in living in and around Bob's Lobster, it's so easily done. And literally, and you've just done a great campaign with, we're back and welcome back, and it was welcoming. And of course, all those people that George had put the time into, all the independents, who of course, by the way, big up Daniel Cobb, because they're bigging up each other. So it's really lovely. And it's not just talking about property the whole time. The sourdough, it's not property. And it's amazing how when you stop talking about property and you commit to doing something different, think different. That was one of my favorites, of course, from our Steve Jobs. And, that's what agents don't do enough of. So this is why Trevor's #1 in Cambridge in the lettings market, smashing it out of the park over all the big corporates. And George is never worried about all of the national brands. He's just worried about his culture, marrying his brand, his culture, his family values with some clear messaging. And actually, we've had a bloody good fun doing it.
We have. Yeah,
it's if you're having fun, I think that's half the journey, and everything else comes behind it.
And I think it's fair to say that independent agents who may be smaller than those big sort of faceless corporate enterprises, they're more agile by nature because, you know, you have a voice. It's easier for you to find your voice. It's easier for you to get out there and respond to events. I actually think that the public are much more receptive of supporting smaller independents as well when it comes to community support. And we as agents, we make the mistake all the time of thinking that the only thing on people's minds is when are they moving, and are they thinking of buying or selling or renting, and so on. But they're not. They're intensely concerned, though, about where they live, and the sort of personalities behind the businesses that they walk past every day, the places that they shop. And if you're able to tap into that, it's a beautiful synergy between independent estate agency and the community around it. It tends to flow from there.
I think that's really important because I think one of the dangers is we're seeing a lot of prop tech, and prop tech is great, but it doesn't get away from personal relationships. And it is the personal touch, it is the relational relationship that makes people want to come to you. And I think if you run it just on prop tech, then you just get a big corporate and you're just packing up like a supermarket. And that's not what people actually want.
I totally agree, Trevor. One of the things that I think people forget, or certainly agents would do well to consider, is that we're very good when people move into an area and when they move out, but we don't think about that time in between. And when you're moving, it normally signals an important chapter in your life. Is it your first home, getting married, kids, moving out of an area? These are big moments. So one, celebrate and be awesome around that. But if you're moving into an area, then welcome them in. Be that go-to, to tell them where great coffee is, where to do dry cleaning, where to go and have a pint.
Or the church charity event that you sponsor every year. It's a no-brainer, isn't it?
Yeah.
One, it's fun. It's a good jolly and a get out for everyone in the sunshine, hopefully. Bit of branding, but it is actually engaging with the community.
But one thing I would say on that, Ben, as well, is if you're going to do it, mean it. I don't do it because it's such a great sponsorship. Do it because you actually know the people, or you've taken time to get to know them. Otherwise, you're just going to look like another brand who's just trying to slap their brand on someone else's great event. We actually work on that example. We're part of the organisation committee. We do all the fundraising. You've got to mean it.
Yeah, I think that's so important. They say sincerity is the hardest thing to fake, but in a state agency, you'd be amazed at how much hard work goes into trying to fake sincerity sometimes. And I think over the course of the pandemic, this became very clear as well. You saw some agencies, particularly smaller independent agencies, taking great initiative. There was that time where we were all offering homeschooling parents free printing, for instance, and that was such a popular initiative within communities because it seemed genuine. To me, and this might be my cynicism, when I saw bigger brands then jumping on that, it typically was 2 or 3 weeks later than all the independents, and I thought to myself, well, the public are not going to perceive that as being genuine. So finding that genuine voice, I think, is easier for an independent, and hopefully Starberry are using, although you're right, Trevor, prop tech will never be a replacement for that particular relationship that you will have with your community. I think it's probably fair to say that with Starberry, prop tech has probably helped you communicate that voice further and initiated those conversations in probably more households than you would have reached through traditional media back in the day.
I always think that prop tech, Simon Whale would like this one, should be done like a good cocktail. You shouldn't actually be able to taste the spirits.
Yeah.
So if prop tech is done well, it's blended in really nicely, really naturally. The audience doesn't even need to know about it, all the crazy integrations and the moving parts in the background. And it mustn't get in the way either, so don't suddenly throw a brandy into a white spirit cocktail, but Yeah, so I think that there's a time and a place for it. It's doing some wonders, as you and the Kerfuffle team are promoting on a regular basis. That there's some great time savings and efficiencies, but it's combining that human aspect. It's actually giving more time back to the agent to do that touchy-feely, emotive hand-holding bit, and let the tech just hum away in the background and surface when you next need to jump on a hot opportunity, or so on.
And in terms of the having a more sort of holistic approach to generating interest in and inquiries, is it fairly evenly spread across sort of online and Facebook particularly? Is that still delivering the results that it was? Is that where the attention and the focus is, or should we be shifting our focus and our sites to newer platforms? Are we about to see Nitin go live on TikTok, for instance?
You're already there, aren't you, Nitin? You've done a couple of TikToks.
I've done a couple, just I always like to, experiment and see what I can do. And since, I don't have a social filter, nor do I have like, any shame whatsoever, I'd probably do it and just see what works. But like you said, David, the roles of the different channels are changing over as we speak. So, when there was a time when Facebook used to deliver all the leads that you need, there wasn't, you didn't need any other platform. But off late, what we're seeing is Facebook, although it's continuing to deliver that traffic, is becoming more powerful as a brand building platform. So it's the whole essence is to identify how a platform is actually helping you as a brand. Because Facebook might work brilliantly for George, but might not deliver anything for Trevor. On the other hand, SEO is doing amazing stuff for Trevor, and it's not doing anything for George. This is just just giving you an example. Not that it's not working for them, but then it's all about identifying what really works for each client, because you really can't go out there with a cookie cutter and say this is the same thing that would apply for everyone. So you could be in a place like Trevor, where Trevor is, where you have a lot of young population, and probably you need to look at different channels where they are probably at. Where if you want to get a lot more uh, people to come in and rent out your apartments. On the other hand, you might be in the high street in London where it's more or less high-end products. So you need to choose your channels properly. So the one thing that we do at Starberry for all our clients is we don't go in with like a boxed strategy saying that this is what works. So even George and Trevor, of the 5 odd years that you guys have been working with us, we've probably switched strategies multiple times, maybe every quarter, because that's the need of the hour. And it becomes one channel that is actually driving a lot of leads right now. The moment we see that it's not performing as much, we start looking at where else do we what other channel do we use, because end of the day we have a responsibility to the clients as well. It's not about just burning budgets. It's about actually getting them results that would want them to continue working with us longer. So it's all about adapting to the different channels out there. And I would say that every agent, every client has a different approach that we take. So, but definitely, yes, digital is the number one channel that's driving in a lot of the traffic.
I would agree with Victor there. I would add one of the things that there's two things I'd say to this. One is around just the marketing fundamentals. Make sure you understand your target audience, as Nitin was talking about. That hasn't changed. If you understand your target audience and what message you want to get, then Starberry are going to be great at saying, right, George, you need to use these channels and these mediums to deliver that message to that audience. And you're right, Trevor's going to have a different audience from me, and therefore that's worth spending the time on that. The other thing I'd say is the agility. What I absolutely love about being an independent, and I don't miss one bit about the big corporate world, is the ability to react really quickly. And this is where it's a great collaboration with Starberry, as we talked about earlier. If there's something that's worth trying, whether it's TikTok, whether it's a new channel to experiment with, go for it. That's my one bit of advice to anyone working with Starberry going forward, because you've got to learn so much from it. And yeah, it might not deliver you 100 leads, but don't look for the quick fix, because by doing that, you're already ahead of the game and you're ahead of your competition. And believe me, those big corporates, there'll be weeks of process about sign off, various layers having to feedback on different levels of creative. With these guys, we come up with an idea and we roll with it. 80% delivered solution is better than 100% not, as they say.
And I would say that you need to be in for the long haul. I mean, we've been now doing the marketing with Starberry for 5 years, and I looked at the stats this week, and over 2/3 of all our leads are coming from natural contact, either direct or just searching for us and not paid. So it does take time, I think, to build up a base from which to work from, and it doesn't happen overnight.
No, that's it. It's a journey that you're going on, and you've got to keep an eye on the ball. You know, you've got to keep your eye on the ball, should I say? You've got to look at your website. You've got to look at your conversion rate optimization. So, you know, is that form working? Is it optimal? I mean, we're always looking at that sort of thing. We just had a full makeover, didn't we, Trevor, on your site just literally last week or so, really working out what are the primary calls to action, stripping down any unnecessary clutter, because it's not so complicated. It's not like got multiple different channels. It's landlords and tenants primarily. It's property management, you know, and it's very focused. And you know, making sure that you review what you're doing. So over the years, I mean, we've done a number of MOTs on the websites. We do iterative changes. We don't just plow in with, you know, dramatic changes. The problem is, if you do that, you have no idea what it was that worked or didn't work. And then you've got to be agile as well to the market, because, you know, depending on what bomb goes off, what coronavirus kicks off, or Brexit, or whatever else is served up to us, you've got to steer accordingly. Sometimes it's a team game. You've got to reduce budgets because you just have to, you know. But the great thing is that we stay in close contact. We don't waste any time, you know, mucking around. We don't mind hearing bad news, because I think you've got to serve good news and bad news, haven't you? The people who just ignore and just get the SEO report every month, don't look at that thing. That's just a waste of time. And we don't want to waste people's time. We'd much prefer to hear that isn't working. But in the same breath, as Nitin highlighted, you've got to give it a good run. Don't just test it for 2 weeks and say it isn't working, because that's not realistic. So it is a real kind of team thing, and a bit of an education. So we're learning about the property market all the time, and we're trying to adapt the digital to reflect that. The other thing is like little things like, you know, again, down in lockdown, using things like Calendly, you know, conversational forms, all these little things that we find that, you know, video ask, there's all sorts of little functions that we find are working over here. So what we try to do is always share them. Now, whether they're appropriate for George or Trevor at the time is another thing altogether. But it is a really fluid process that we kind of follow.
And it is a long-term process, because I suppose, George, you'll know this from other sort of marketing backgrounds. When you're trying to get people to buy a product online these days, it's a fairly simple proposition. Here's the can of Coke. It costs 50p. Click here and you can have it in your hand within an hour, whatever the proposition might be. With property and with generating interest for estate agents, it's a long game. What you're doing is you're trying to engender trust. You're trying to build trust with and communicate a voice and a message to the public that might not actually be of any value whatsoever, either in an hour or a week or maybe even a year. But 2 years down the line, you might hope that next time they're thinking of moving, they remember a really pleasant interaction that they had, and that they then know who they're coming back to, because it's a much longer term proposition. You have to be in it for the long game. If you're not willing to invest in those relationships and you're expecting instant results, then it's not the industry for you, is it, really?
Absolutely right, David. I couldn't agree more. These aren't low ticket items. This is possibly the biggest thing you'll do, you know, the largest amount of money you'll spend. Whether you're renting or selling, you know, it's still a significant amount of money. And therefore, it's all about those quality interactions. And of course, people look at different touch points, which is why you've got to look at the whole marketing mix. You know, you've got to know what your short-term and your long-term play is. The long-term play is the investment I've put in with all the local businesses. That really came to fruition because for example, during COVID, I reached out to them just to check how they were, not for any sort of personal gain or brand building exercise. But as a result, it then led to learning more about some of the challenges they've had. I then did a few interviews with them, and then that led to this wonderful campaign, Welcome Back to the High Street. And then we did a complete takeover of our window displays. And people remember that, and I've had, and this is where it becomes all worth it. And this is what, 2 months ago, I have a client come and say, George, I'm selling with you. I'm not instructing anyone else because I love the campaign you did with Welcome Back to the High Street and what you did for the other local businesses. And people remember that stuff. So you're absolutely right. But there's no quick win. There is definitely no quick win.
And I think from our, what's the whole, we're all learning as we're going along. There was a period, I don't know, social media a few years back. It was just like something that the estate agents were playing with. We didn't really believe it. It wasn't really delivering anything and so on and so forth. Obviously, times evolved. COVID has accelerated all sorts as well because we were locked at home. We literally were hanging off our digital worlds to stay connected. And there has been a step change. Well, likewise, in our business, we used to be worried about how much traffic, how many sessions, how many clicks. But I used to say to the guys, look, I come back from the meeting, I'd sit around the boardroom table with these gents or others, or the virtual boardroom table. And the question just was, how many valuations did it lead? Or how many forms did I get filled in? So we've kind of turned it on the head, and we're now really driving towards that marketing ROI, and we just keep honing around it. What channel's doing what? Now what does, you and I had a session, didn't we, David, the other day?
We did, yes.
Around that. And it's what would you pay for evaluation? What would you pay for a new bit of block management? You need to, as a business, actually ascertain what it's worth to you, because it isn't a one-time worth. A new landlord, hopefully there'll be renewals year in, year out. So it's not just about that first day or that first deal. It's about the 10 years worth of working with them. So having those figures and then setting targets and managing budgets, and also managing what, as Trevor alluded to, how much time we've got in the day. I can't be doing all those channels. And maybe you're not that bothered about tenants because you've got a city full of students clambering for the next availability. So it's about just really understanding what your KPIs are, what your goals are, and really working the budgets accordingly. And I think that's making a real difference, making a difference to us internally. We have our phrase, create awesomeness, but deliver results, and the bit typically, well, I do care a lot about create awesomeness, but I more and more are just honing in, laser focused around deliver results, because then we will be with awesome clients like George and Trevor for many, many years. But if you don't,
it's really interesting what you say. I speak to hundreds of agents, and you will never hear an agent say, "Oh, I'm struggling to find tenants for properties," or "I'm struggling to find buyers for properties." They've sort of got that down. If they've understood the formula that if they've got the bait, the fish will come. And so they need those instructions. And so all the focus of an estate agent's marketing machine tends to go into generating leads. But when we talk about leads, we're not talking about people that necessarily want to rent a property, but it'll be a landlord that's looking for somebody to rent their property or look after it, or a seller equally. And that's where the focus is. So I saw an interesting statistic in some of the information that you sent through, that you've been able to reduce the cost per valuation lead quite really significantly in some cases, by up to 50%. How are you guys doing this? How's that achieved?
Nitin?
Yeah. So it's basically, a combination of using the right channels properly. So, you have multiple channels, you know exactly what you're looking for, and we define what a lead is. So a valuation lead is one of the most prized assets for many clients. So what we've done is we've actually tried to first thing is to get the right traffic in. and second is to actually make the process so seamless that it's completed. You booked in a valuation meeting, or you booked in an appointment with as few clicks as possible. So it's a combination of marketing driving the right leads and your website working overtime to actually ensure that the whole process is as seamless as possible. So, and when you start breaking down each of these elements into individual, smaller systems, then it becomes much easier. We find that probably Google Ads is a great source to get targeted people from a particular location with whom we can drive in. On the other hand, social media is helping you nurture the kind of people who visited your website but didn't really get down to putting together a lead. So when they jump off, we have remarketing kicking in, so that you're constantly building the brand and keeping your brand up there. So the next time they decide, okay, fine, I'll go ahead and just try out a valuation, the first name that comes to mind is the website you probably visited 2 weeks ago, but you've been seeing their ads continuously. So that actually brings in a lot of clients as well. And then there's the other channel, email marketing, which really helps. People really underestimate the power of email marketing, where you have like an email going out. It's not spammy. It's just once a month. You have interesting information that's out there. So once again, it's all about nurturing leads on one end, driving fresh leads on the other side, and just ensuring that the journey on the platform where you want to get those valuations is as seamless as possible. And for every client, the way we approach each of these individual elements might differ, but this is like the core essence of how we actually manage to get your leads down, because there's no unwanted leads coming in. People who are coming in are actually interested in getting a valuation done. They have the time and they actually go ahead and complete the whole process which we want them to do. In some cases, that's simple as filling out a form, which has a very high conversion rate. Others, it's about booking a meeting into the calendar. So whatever the client considers to be a proper valuation lead, we work towards that. So we don't set definitions in the outset saying if a person clicks on the valuation button, that's considered a lead. No, we actually ask the client, what do you consider? So it's sometimes just about getting the name and email address and phone number. Others, it's about getting a meeting booked into the calendar. So we work accordingly. And when you continuously optimize these elements, the cost tends to come down, because you are actually getting a high quality leads coming in who are actually converting.
And you're able to focus your campaigns in the right area.
Yeah, and it's things like, looking at the valuation form. How many fields have you got in that form? If you take one field out, will that take your 1% conversion rate to 2% conversion rate? Suddenly you've doubled your leads just by optimizing your form. If you're running SEO and you increase your organic traffic, you're currently getting 10 valuations from organic traffic, and then you double your traffic or increase your traffic by 25%. You've just got 25% more leads from. So it's just honing in on them. Google Maps, Google Local, I always say it's the lowest hanging fruit. It is just very powerful. It's their secret social media almost. Google, they failed on all their social media, but actually their Google Maps is king of the hill, because people just use their phones, look for you, dial a number, and the phone numbers are tracked. So it's probably the biggest thing for us is making sure campaigns are set up, make sure that all the tracking is in place. Obviously, we talked about the nirvana of connecting right back into the CRMs. We're not quite there with both these gents. Poor Trevor's been on a journey with what we hoped was magic dust, but it's not there quite yet. But George is also on a journey with the CRMs to see if we can bully them into letting us join up the journeys. But if you haven't got that, then what we do is we say, right, there were 15 valuation leads. How many of these people actually listed? We've got the forms. We know what their email address is. So we go offline and we do it manually. But it's doing it like laser focus, doing it meticulously and iteratively, squeezing out the juice month in, month out, and working out which channels it is based on what your affordability is. And they're all different costs as well. So, we'll find that we might get, from running Google Ads, we might get a valuation lead for £150, whereas with Google Local Maps, it might be £32. The difference is you can't throw more money at Google Maps, particularly. You can only get to a certain level. You're in page one, number one slot, and you get that many leads. So it's then working out, right, how can we push this further? And if you've optimized your forms, or we're now even looking at things like pre-valuation and valuation process to actually help the leads that came in. How can we help them convert better behind the scenes? So it is really honing in around that.
And things are changing, aren't they? I mean, you just mentioned the CRM space over there, and it's always been a bit of a bone of contention that however good or big your CRM provider might be, they weren't always the best at playing with others. And in terms of the fabled unicorns of the open API that everybody always claims to have, that suddenly isn't as open as they make it out to be. I think what we've understood is we've got a long way to go. But I think what we've also understood is that the future of our industry very much is in collaborative tie-ups, and that if your tech isn't able to communicate properly together and you're not able to deliver efficiencies in-house that you're delivering to members of the public. So you've just been talking over there, Nitin, about how easy it is for somebody to book a valuation. We've made it seamless. We've taken away all the barriers. And very often behind the scenes, if the agent has to go through a clunkier process to confirm the same valuation, it's almost like the tech is playing catch up. But Ben, do you get a sense that that is starting to change?
I mean, we're having some fun now. It's just starting to finally happen. I mean, sadly, the player that's not been really in the market at all, the juggernaut being Salesforce, is showing signs of, well, I say showing signs. They basically do have an open API, force.com. You can do whatever the hell you want. You need the budget, though. You need a developer in-house. So most independent agents do not have the budget to have a developer coding their CRM to fit their criteria. Repits of this world are definitely getting there now. That we have now got our app in Foundations. We can see updates for all the applicants. We can pass information back into the feedback, into the notes fields, and if someone updates their email address in the CRM, it updates in the My account, and vice versa. So all of these things are going to help us with our marketing dollars to hopefully fine tune our campaigns. But there's patience required. We just have to get what we can get when we can get it. And I think that's what together all of us have been doing to date, and we'll continue to keep our nerve and keep pushing on the bits we can make a difference on.
Yeah, well, it's great to hear that is changing, because some of the names that you've mentioned there, and as you say, I mean, with Salesforce, if they don't release that kind of functionality, eventually somebody's going to decide to play around with it and break it for themselves. And there are some fantastic independent agents out there that have gone to the trouble of trying to marry that all up. But as we discussed earlier, it's hard enough to do our jobs with the million different hats that we're wearing without having to now become programmers and developers and to understand the tech behind it as well. So I'm presuming that George and Trevor are both in extremely capable hands in terms of you guys being able to guide them through that journey. Is there a sense that now that George and Trevor have done the hard work and started their marketing journey, does it become easier over time? Is that something that you'll spend a lot of money on at the beginning, typically as a new agency trying to break new ground, and then over time it gets easier?
I don't think it does, actually, because I think the more you know that you should be doing. So in one sense, it becomes more challenging. So before I heard Ben's mantra, video, life was much simpler. That said, I come back to what I said right at the beginning. I have to recognize my capacity and the size of agency we are. I look at some of the things that George does. some of the things he does on food, for example. I think it's wonderful. And I looked hard at, could we do a similar thing? But we just don't have the capacity. So I think limiting what you do is important and doing that very well. I think the other thing I'd just pick up on is leads. I mean, when we did have our little foray into another software, we learned so much of how to handle leads. I learned, for example, for a small agency like us, we're handling about 10,000 inquiries from tenants a year. And we weren't doing it properly. Now, it may sound a lot, may sound very little to someone like George, but I've now learned how to do it. And I think always learning, and we've now gone to another supplier that will handle those leads for us. And we're just exploring how to do that. And I think you've just got to keep pushing. And so when something doesn't go quite right, you learn from it and say, right, what can I now do, having learned from it? I think that's absolutely key if we're going to make really progress. And I think, personally, I think that the CIOs have a lot to deliver. I still think they're actually glorified spreadsheets with a database and an email supplier, and they haven't woken up to AI software and what can happen. And I think we need to kick them hard, because I think they're a bit too lazy. That's about a harsh thing to say, isn't it?
No, I think, you know what, I think that's a fair comment. I think that if you've dealt with enough CRMs, and I've been in agency long enough to have used most of them, but you know that there are some there that are definitely now sitting up and paying attention, and I think they're understanding that we want to do more with our data, that we want to do more with our leads. I mean, you talked about lettings leads there, Trevor. You'd be forgiven for thinking that a lot of your tenant inquiries are just transient bits of business. Either they want to rent a property from you or not. You probably never see them again. They'll be students. They're unlikely to be clients of yours in the future. But that way of thinking has completely changed now. And we understand that every inquiry for a property from a buyer or somebody who's looking to rent the property, they could be your next client, and it's worth nurturing that lead as much as any other.
I would add to that. I don't think agents know how lucky they are with the amount and quality of data that we have at our disposal. We know about personal circumstances, we know about finances, we know about jobs, we know what toothpaste they have, for goodness sake, when we go and do, into their bedrooms. And therefore there's a great responsibility that comes with that. I can't underline that enough. But importantly as well, you might have a really whiz-bang CRM system with two-way API connected to every other platform, but how are you going to use it? And nothing will replace, and certainly in the 8 years that I've been doing this, the fundamentals and that do the basics really well. So, Trevor and I don't have massive budgets, and we are small independent agents. But actually, there is no replacement for working what you've got. And you're right, Trevor. Yes, it is a bit of a glorified spreadsheet, but as long as the data's in there correctly, the email address is right, the phone number's right, and you've got a good system and a good team in place, and picking up the phone, creating a great relationship with someone, that's going to get you 90% of your business. The rest is all whizzy-bangy stuff, which is great. And believe me, it's exciting, because if you want to be number one in the area, then you need to be really getting to grips with it. So back to the answer to the original question, is it any easier? No way. You just get exposed like this. You like every week you feel even more naive, because things are moving at such a pace. But I think it's just having the confidence and not to get paralyzed by it. Be comfortable being out of control. It's got to be my love mantra for the last 20 years. And that's the feeling with that. But then the likes of Star, we can just help navigate through it. Just identify what's working for you. You do that really well. So get your Google My Business page looking great. Make sure your SEO is looking fabulous. And that's a good start. Just do one thing at a time, and then be prepared to come back to it. So, I asked Starberry last week, let's review my Google My Business pages, because they're out of, they need a refresh. They haven't got a picture of me with my cap and Starberry t-shirt on.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's very easy to, there's so many channels these days. I mean, there literally are so many different channels, and you just need to chip away. You need to make a plan, and just literally just keep moving along. The more that it is mapped out, the more that you do have, a content strategy, a keyword strategy. And this is why, I mean, the sellers in me says, what you need is someone to run these channels with you. You either do it yourself and just do a few, but on the whole, we don't just have one person working with George or Trevor. There's a whole bunch of people behind the scenes. We try and create some consistency. So they've both built up relationships with their digital marketing managers who, initially didn't know their business, but slowly but surely getting under the bonnet. And then you learn how to work together. You create traction. So although it doesn't supposedly get easier, between us, we know how to work together. We know the nuances of the businesses. We know that we can jump on these Zooms quickly if we need to. And again, these guys, were way beyond the curve, before the curve, should I say, on that front. And it's also educating the rest of the team. So I think, George, you've been, pushing for the other parts of your team to pick up the mantra. I'm always saying, get them to get their iPhones rolling. There's footage. It's autumn coming. Capture the footage, and it's just getting people's confidence. I mean, I personally think that estate agents, there's a whole bunch of kind of performing and acting requirements. Now I know
Sure.
that the acting industry has actually fed the estate agent industry over the years, while they're resting, but there is a massive twist into being communicators, being visible in this digital environment and the offline environment, and almost sort of blurring the lines now. And just having that confidence that it's way better. I always used to say to people when they all had their cameras off, and we used to work with them originally, oh, no, I can't do video, I don't do. And I always used to say, so when I walk into your branch, has everyone got a bag over their head? Or do they jump out of their seat with a big smiling face and come and shake my hand and welcome me in, which of course is what 9 times out of 10 they do. And so I think there is a whole nother level of fun starting now, and we hopefully can.
You heard it here first, folks. Estate agency is more divas than RADA. And I think that the trick, Ben, is really to try and come away from, it's never, video content. The good thing about video content, whether it's live or not, is that it's genuine, because you will make mistakes. There will be a bit of a lag here and there. You may and ah. It doesn't necessarily need to be Hollywood perfect every single time. And in fact, if we take a shift away from trying to produce something and move towards documenting something. So for instance, you said, look, it's autumn out there. Get your guys out there with everyone's got a mobile phone with a great camera on it these days. Get some local images. It's easy enough done, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like squirrels collecting nuts for the winter. You just got to get it in the can, and then we can use it when there's no leaves on the trees and it's looking freezing out there,
Fantastic. Right. Well, I've taken up almost a full hour of these gentlemen's time, and I know they've got many more hats to wear yet today. So I want to thank George Cobb and Trevor Haynes for their time today and their input. And as ever, Nitin and Ben from Starberry, it's been really fascinating. Anybody that's interested in getting in touch with Starberry and to benefit from the sort of services that they provide, all their details are on Kerfuffle. I wish you all a wonderful week.
Thank you very much to everyone for all your contributions. And thanks, David, for having us.
No problem. Always a pleasure. Take care, guys.
See you guys. Bye-bye.